On this special feature of the CricBlog podcast, we will focus on fantasy cricket ahead of the IPL. And who better to join us than this very special guest? He's a journalist, freelance writer, fantasy cricket expert, and a terrific cricket fan. I've had the pleasure to interact with him over the last couple of years. It's so great to have the chance to speak to you, Nikhil Popat from, or a.k.a. CricCrazyNiks. Welcome to the CricBlog podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, guys. I think I'll just focus on the terrific cricket fan. I think that is all that defines me, and I'll want to say to that.
I mean, we have all seen the work that you do on Twitter, and you've worked with Sports Interactive as well for a few years now. So it's absolutely fantastic to have you here. But before we actually move on into fantasy cricket, we'll just first touch on your cricketing journey. I mean, as an Indian, where did your love for the sport start, and what's your first moment that you remember?
So I think it's a very interesting start and something that will join a lot of dots. I started in a very congested family. I mean, we were 12 people in a room, and we didn't have televisions for each one of us, obviously. So there was only a fixed time when you could see TV. So I could not catch up on any sport or any event. So all that I had was newspapers. But luckily we had a TV showroom next to our house. So what I do is I'd rush from my school and just sit there in front of that shop and just watch whatever I could. Because then the day-nighters used to start at 7. So you could catch up the second innings pretty much entirely. So that is when the connection started. Over that period of time, I did not have a good time making a new friends in school and college life. So I thought it is best if I can find something else, and I found cricket. And it is when and then we had the internet boom. And then you had those Symbian phones where I would follow Cricinfo. And interestingly, I would do something that has brought the fantasy angle in my life. I would sit down and write every over prediction and what was my thought of it. So if, say, India is batting first and you had Sehwag opening, I would for sure know the first over would be 8 for no loss or 12 for 1. So that's how it began. I would have intervals at 1 over 5 or 10 over 1. So that is it actually when I got closer to the game in terms of trying to, it was not for anybody else, it was just for myself and to get better at it. And thankfully then we had Twitter, and then I got an opening to do ball-to-ball commentary for a couple of years. And that is where, and the rest, as you all have been aware of now from there.
That is a fantastic story. I mean, that's actually,
that is awesome.
That is a fantastic story.
Like, what was your first experience with fantasy cricket, and what got you hooked onto it?
Yeah, so as I said, my first experience was ESPN Super Selector. I think a lot of us who got into fantasy cricket played a lot of Super Selector in our early days. And for some reason, I found it a bit hard to crack because obviously there were a lot more nitty-gritties involved, which now, having spent so much time into it, I realized that, it's not as easy as just taking a blunt punt every day.
Yeah.
There is a lot of matchup, numbers, everything involved, and yet there is no guarantee that you could win. So that is where it started for me. And then obviously you had the big launch of Dream11, who's then now the boss of the market. And so that's where I started with it. And obviously I always had that prediction angle with me. So which is why I found it very easy to relate to it. And most importantly, it kept me busy. I had excuses to not go anywhere. I just had excuses to watch the match at home. That is all that I wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we move on to actually how you go about the fantasy cricket, you can call it an industry right now in India and all around the world with IPL, CPL. For a person like me who has absolutely zero experience of fantasy cricket, I've tried getting into it. I just, my mind doesn't work like that. If you had to teach me fantasy cricket in 5 minutes, how does it work?
So I'll keep it very simple. In essence, fantasy cricket is all about how well you visualize the game. Now, and that is something each one of us do in each one's own way. Like I would if there's a game, there's a particular flow of the game in my mind. There's a particular flow of the game in your mind. There will be certain players you will think will do well. There are certain players I will think will do well. Fantasy cricket is just putting all that on paper and then finding enough belief and strength in that particular visualization so that if that thing pans out exactly as you have planned, then you're going to earn something out of that good visualization of yours. That is it. Like, that is as simply as I can put it to you. That it's just basically how well you know the game. That's it. Bottom line.
Yeah, you've nailed it there. Now, just give us a quick overview of how quickly it has grown in India. I've seen exponential growth the last few years with fantasy cricket in India. And how does it change the way you watch cricket?
Yeah, it's been a very interesting ride. As you say, rightly said, that in the last couple of years, once Dream11 got the sponsor rights, you saw they were very big on ads and they got it to every household. And the thing with fantasy cricket in India is all this used to happen at markets, at bus stalls, at any crowded place where you would have a discussion. And their discussions would be serious discussions, and you don't want to mess into those kind of discussions. So what this has done is it's brought the game to that, what you want to call a tier 2, tier 3 level cities as well, wherein people have always had interest, but they never knew that, you could make a decent amount of money. Obviously, you can lose a lot as well. But the very fact that, you could watch a game and also have some amount coming back to you just because of your understanding of the game, why would anyone not try that?
Yeah. And obviously you touched on that you can lose money. So losses are a part of sport, and even fantasy sports, obviously. So what is your tip in fantasy sport to dealing with these sort of losses, especially for those players who are getting into it, just now and just starting their fantasy sports career?
Yeah, I think it is, as I keep say to myself, that it's very important to know what you're doing and be very honest with yourself. Which is why I tell to a lot of people that be very aware of whatever you're doing, because our minds are not always in our hands. I mean, not literally, but in terms of what we are thinking is very important.
Great point. Yeah.
The first thing that comes to everybody's mind is, okay, I lost this because of bad luck. It was not bad luck. There is no bad luck. There is either three things. Either you did not imagine the game rightly, or you took an unnecessary risk on a particular player, or three, it was a one-off performance by somebody who's known to put those performances. Now, if you are able to identify the crux of the problem, that why you are losing, you'll probably get better at it over a period of time. And it is important to give it time. Nothing comes to us easy. If it was easy, everybody would be a millionaire or billionaire just in like a month time. So it's important to pick your games, to pick your players, know the patterns, and then get deep dive into it with enough smart investment plans as well. Now we have so many platforms. So it's important to know what will work best for you, what kind of player you are, and then accordingly get into it.
Apart from Dream11, which is kind of the obvious, the bigger one, what are the other smaller platforms that you would recommend?
Yeah, I have one that I'm closely associated with is Fan2Play. There you get an option of playing with 5 all-rounders, which is not a very common option, and you can play with only 2 batsmen or 2 bowlers. So if it's a series like Sri Lanka, South Africa, you're not going to need batsmen. You're going to need more all-rounders and more bowlers. So that is one place to be. There is another platform that I'm going to soon bring up, so that this becomes a good plug for me, that please watch out. I'm going to introduce you guys, everyone, to another platform where it is easier to win comparatively because of the less competition, but it's also a great place to play the fantasy cricket game.
Fantastic. Now looking forward to seeing that. Now, in terms of your preparation, what's your preparation like before you put together your Fantasy 11? Give the listeners, the viewers, sort of an insight into the important things to look for as part of your research. You talk about how important research is in terms of putting a Fantasy 11 together, but what are the kind of things that you research and to give yourself the best possible chance of putting together a strong team and winning?
And especially the unnecessary risk that you spoke about earlier, can you also just give us an example of that?
Yeah, I'll take a dig at my own experiences here. So firstly, what I try and do is, firstly, I pick a game or a particular series. Obviously, I can't watch every game that is possible. I wish I could, but I try and cover most games that I'm sure that I'm going to watch, because you can't just make teams based on scorecards. You're never going to know what actually happened in that game. Somebody could make an 88, with a lot of close LW calls, catches being dropped, and the
Very
scorecard
true.
will tell you that 88, oh, that's a great no, you should pick him in the next game, but that's not the case. Similarly, a guy could take Pfeiffer and not be David Wiese and just take junk wickets at the death. So you have to be very sure in terms of that, yes, you're going to be able to watch the game so that you can make these small notes in terms of, yes, who bowled well, who bowled bad. Now, if it's a pre-match, like the series that hasn't started yet, what I generally try and do is, obviously having picked my series, I pick the 8 to 9 players who I'm very sure that, yes, they will perform. And now that how they will perform is based on numbers and based on my experience of watching them. That, okay, let's take the example of Sri Lanka, South Africa. Now, I know Quinton de Kock, Riza Hendrick, Gianni Malan, these guys are going to be sure starters in the team and they are likely to do the bulk of the scoring for South Africa. Also, I know, yes, Van Derson is a good guy, but there are preferences for each player. When I start into this homework for a particular series, I look at stats of every player that is playing. And then obviously, if you see those enough, you will find there are some very obvious patterns for each player. Like RVD doesn't get to bat often if he's chasing.
Yeah.
Now, most of the times the top three is going to do the work for South Africa. If not, RVD is going to probably left to do too much of it. So these all scenarios, visualizations are what the data is going to help you with. So those are the notes that I try and pick. That which bowler should I prefer in the first innings? Which bowler should I prefer in the second innings? I'll go back to the Sri Lanka South Africa example. So Sri Lankan bowlers, I know if South Africa bat first, they are going to win the game. If not, if Sri Lanka don't put up a good score, there is no point taking any Sri Lankan bowlers. So that is how I go about the game. That, okay, these are the two scenarios. If A bats first, what are my lineup of players that I should try? If B is batting first, then what are the players I'm going to try on? And this is the first thing. Now, once I'm done with this data, if a game is done, we will obviously have some clear patterns that, okay, Sri Lanka is losing top order very early, maybe pack the game with the middle order options. So again, all of this is because you're watching the game. There are certain players who you know are definitely going to do well compared to the others. And now, because you're watching the game, you know that, okay, this is the little edge I have. And these new players who come in, and which is why you go back to picking your series, that if there is an important domestic T20 league, you would want to watch that. Because that's where you'll get to know what a Tikshina is going to do, what a Shamshi can do before he broke into the scene and now is the number one bowler. So that, all those, like this, it is simple, taking the list of players, finding patterns for each one of them, and then finding out what is the best possible scenario for that guy to perform. And obviously, you're not going to get it right always, but as long as you can get to a median wherein, you're not too good or not too bad, you'll obviously catch up with time in terms of getting the exact flow.
You have probably answered one of our fan questions that was asked by Debashish Sarangi at Plum_in front. He asks, what is more essential while picking players in a fantasy team, gut feel or logical analysis? Do you think it's a mixture of both?
Yeah, as I said, it's obviously rightly a mixture of both, but for some players, it doesn't apply. Like if it's Kiran Phala in a big match, you are just going to pick it. There is no way he's not going to do anything in a game. He could come in, he could bowl 4 overs. In CPL, anything can happen. But even otherwise, we've seen some kind of, like Shimran Hetman the last night. He did not look in the best of forms. He was not picked by men, but he ended up scoring a good amount of runs. Similarly, in the second innings, data tells you that Evan Lewis and Chris Gayle are better while chasing. And they both opened the batting and they both got good 40+ scores. So the data will help. But there are times the data is not going to help. And that's when your gut feel, your knowledge of the game is going to come into picture. Wherein, who do you think is going to get that guy? If the data says that, okay, maybe Kohli is not going to do well in the second innings, but is there a bowler to trouble him? If not, then you have to go against the data. And if the data supports and you also feel strongly, then at the end, it's what you feel strongly about because you don't want to regret not trying. So I would rather try and fail rather than regretting, had I done this would have happened.
In terms of like stats, how often do you look at like head-to-head stats, players against a particular opposition or a player at a particular ground? Because the pitch is also very important, or how that pitch particularly plays in the past in terms of putting together a team.
As I said, when I have my first look at the players, that's when I look at 3 things. First is if there is an innings preference for them. Where do they prefer to do well? First innings or second innings? Sometimes I'm so stupid that I look at even toss toss influences. Sometimes some players do better when they have when they've won the toss and they've batted. For example, Mushfiqur Rahim, if his side has won the toss and is batted, he probably averages a bit more than say in chases. So sometimes it's not going to work. At the end, the data is in front of everyone. But how do you interpret it is what your gut feel and your knowledge of the game is going to come into picture. That how do you read that data? So one prime example is Shreyas Gopal versus Virat Kohli. It's a very talked about matchup. But how many people know that Gopal actually dismissed him when the game didn't matter? So even the big teams fall for these kind of numbers, which is strange to see because those numbers are not just there. You just have to go back into the context of it. That when were those wickets taken? What was the guy doing when he took those wickets? So yes, that number is important, but you have to go back into that game and check. Okay, this was the situation. Maybe he got it in a clutch situation. Then yes, back that data again. But all this data is where I take it in the first place, like innings preferences. If somebody does like to do better in those, then I also look at a particular bowler who the guy has troubled. Say, for example, if RCB is playing SRH, I know Sandeep Sharma has troubled a lot of RCB top order guys. So in one of my unnecessary risk kind of games, I'll probably risk on dropping Virat Kohli in that game and make Sandeep Sharma my captain. Because then I'm backing one particular scenario to happen. And obviously I can still pick both of them in my regular safe kind of team. But if I want to take that risk with data and gut feel, I can go there. If I see that no, Sandeep Sharma is not bowling well, he's not going to get him out. So then I'll have him in my team, but I'll not make him captain or vice captain. Yeah. And then I'll go against the data and make Kohli the captain. So as you said, all that data is important. And at the end of the day, what you feel strongly about in terms of the scenario that's likely to happen, that's who you go with.
What do you think are the key differences in both CPL and IPL in terms of fantasy cricket? Because all-rounders and bowlers have been brilliant in CPL, but IPL, do you think batsmen will have a bigger role to play in the IPL?
I think it's not something that you can call out directly because, and I would honestly not compare CPL to anything. The kind of season that CPL has had, you've seen stranger, stupid things happen which you cannot comprehend. You've had, forget even CPL, even just take the Sri Lanka South Africa series. I'll tell my personal experience. In the first game, I make Shamshi captain. The guy bowls only 2 overs, doesn't take 2 overs. The next game, I don't make him a captain, but others make him captain and he takes 3 wickets. So in the game yesterday, I make him my vice captain and he takes no wickets. So there is always going to be that battle in terms of you can never be sure who's going to do well. But what you're likely to do is, so there's a smart way, is how I've deciphered, and still I sometimes fail at it, that I probably go with a safer captain and then I go with a riskier vice captain. So like in the yesterday CPL game, I know the bowlers were going to do well, but for some reason I felt no, Hetmeyer will do well and Evan Lewis always does well in chases. So I went with the captain in Evan Lewis because I trusted him to do well in chases. He's often done that. Both times his team has beaten Guyana, they've done well in chases and he's been the guy who's performed. So there is a matchup, there is data, there is ground record. Everything is working in favor of Lewis. So Lewis is my captain. Now I could have simply gone with Sheffer because he's the guy in form. And maybe they could have taken wicket. But I was very sure that Hetmeyer could be a differential guy today. It's a midday, he likes to perform. So my punt pick was Hetmeyer. So even in a game that was dominated by bowlers, I went with the batsman and I came out because there was enough logical thinking behind why I went with those players. So even like for BBL or any other league, I think it's important to, on that day, realize and have a clear idea of what the pitch is going to be like. If it's going to be a fair deck or unfair deck. It is very strange that we don't have accurate pitch reports these days. And it is a sorry state of affairs, but if former players and experts are not going to get it, you and me stand no chance sitting far away from the venue.
Absolutely.
So at the end, it's always a hunch. But as long as you have, I work with data. I'm not blessed with enough gut and blind talent that, okay, this guy is going to do well today. Because that's how I lost a lot of money at the start of my career. So now what I do is I rely on data more, rely on patterns more, because at the end I just want, firstly, my first aim is to get what I've put back. And then if my points work, there are some days that I'm going to make a fortune. So that is those data, that risk are for those kind of things.
And just based on this, how specific or how in-depth do you go when it comes to, let's say, for example, I'll give you an example in my question actually. So let's say SRH is bowling second and, T. Natarajan has a poor record when he bowls in the second innings in the final 5 overs. So am I thinking in too deep, or is this sort of thinking that you rely on?
No, it is exactly the kind of thinking I rely on. Now, let's take your same game example. Now, SRJ is going to bowl second. Firstly, you will know what is the pitch like.
Yeah.
If the pitch is going to support SRH bowlers, then that's one thing that's going to go in Natarajan's favor. But if the pitch is not in the bowler's favor, RCB is probably going to put up a total that is too good, or SRH is not going to put up a total that's too good because of the batting that is there. So you have to see who's going to play. Now, they've dropped Warner, obviously speaking very practically. What are the chances of them getting 180 on a very good batting deck? You are going to need somebody to play a blinder. So will they have enough score, firstly, to have Natarajan come into the game? Because if they don't score 180, Natarajan is probably going to be the last over. The game may not even go till then. So as you said, it is the visualization is correct, but there are a lot more factors that we all obviously take into consideration. That what are the pitches, who are the guys playing? If Bairstow, Warner, everybody's playing, then okay, maybe they can get 140. If the pitch is going to help the pacer or spinners, yes, you will want Natarajan in your team. Otherwise, what you are going to do is you're probably going to take a punt on a new ball bowler, hoping that they win by not more than like 5-6 wickets, and you have the new ball bowler probably taking a couple of wickets. But will Natarajan bowl with the new ball? No, you're not sure. So that is how it is, as deep as you said. But as we rightly talked about right now, that there are a lot more factors that decide how much that guy is going to eventually come into the game.
Yeah. Another question by one of our listeners again at Robin_Rounder. What's a good investment strategy in fantasy cricket?
So I think it is probably one of the biggest reasons why a lot of us, and including myself, we end up losing money than making, because we don't think seriously about our investment. Not every game you're going to be able to predict the right flow. So what I've tried to do from my past experiences, I divide games into 3 categories. A category where I'm very sure about the game. B, where I'm not sure what is going to happen because there are too many good players and I might have to drop somebody. And the C is like a CPL scenario. Every team is playing with 10 bowlers. You're not going to know who's going to bowl 4. Somebody can bowl 5 if the rules permit. So in those games, I'm going to concentrate only on Grand Leagues. So my investment will be the least in that type C game. It will be more in B and it will be highest in A, which is why I invest the most in Test cricket, because I know that my brain is going to comprehend what is going to happen far more easily in Test cricket than I'm going to be able to predict a T20 game. So which is why I back all my instincts in cricket gut feel in Test matches. Like I was very happy with the England game series because in all 3 games I had very unusual captains. I had James Anderson in 1 game. I had Shardul Thakur in 1 game. I had Chris Wokes in 1 game. Nice. But again, there was proper logic behind it because James Anderson always does well at Lords. He's taken the most wickets at Lords. So there is data. And in the first game, there is likely to be a 4-5 wicket chance any which ways to James Anderson. So you go with that. Then Shardul Thakur is going to play a crucial role because of the form that Jadeja and the people up and down of him are going to do. So obviously it is a risk. But then my vice captain was Shardul Thakur and captain was again James Anderson. Continued to bowl well, I got good rewards. And then the investment strategy is such that whenever I'm taking such risk, those risks will be put in a different kind of leagues. If I'm playing a safe kind of a league, a safe kind of contest, my bet is going to be on Joe Root because he's a common captain. Yeah. So when you're making a safe kind of a contest or a league, you have to be very sure that who you're going to face. Yeah. The guy is likely to bring Root as his captain. So you don't want to look stupid if you don't take Root and he ends up scoring 100 and you are like 500 points behind him. It puts you out of the competition straight away. But the same risk you can do in a higher risk, higher reward kind of contest where you're saying that, okay, Root can score 100. But I think this guy would probably give more points than Root. And he's not going to be picked by a lot more people. So then my investment in that particular kind of contest is different. And all of this works differently for different people. In terms of some kind of players are some who can easily make a safe team. So they invest more in safe kind of things. Some people like to take those risks. Some people don't want to play with a safe team because they want to bring huge, massive amounts. So they play different kind of things and you have to invest differently. So to summarize, there is no sound or a safe investment strategy. It's upon two things. It's how you want to play in terms of do you want to play safe or risky, and what is the return that you're expecting from that particular game in terms of your flow. If it happens as you planned out, are you going to get a good return? Okay, then yes, you should probably invest more. If you're not going to get as you expected, and you think things can go the other way, you would probably want to lessen your investment or invest in different kind of things. So it's kind of a homework that you have to do yourself for what works best for you. But like these are the pointers that can help you in that regard.
Spot on. Great insights, great strategies. Coming up, the IPL starts in a few days. Just feels like the cricket's all on top of each other at the moment. But what are some key, player battles that you're looking forward to in the IPL? Any key players to watch out for from a fantasy perspective?
I think the interesting ones will be the replacements who've come in terms of what roles they are going to play. Like for somebody like Rajasthan, Lewis has been in very good form in the CPL and he's played on similar kind of tracks. So he's going to be a key man if Rajasthan find a way to play him in the 11. And the one thing that you can feel safer about in the IPL is there aren't too many surprises. Like say for CPL, you see somebody coming up the order, Naren's batting position is never sure. But in the IPL, you can actually predict the flow of the game in terms of who's going to do what in what kind of a role. So somebody like a Sam Curran, that guy is going to bowl at the death. So you have to be smart enough in terms of, okay, do you think that guy is going to pick up junk wickets at the death? If yes, please go and take him on. Somebody like a Chris Morris often does that role. Now, Kagiso Rabada has not been among the wickets for the last 2 series that South Africa played. How good he's going to feel about himself when he comes into the IPL, when he knows that, okay, again, spinners might do the bulk of the bowling here again. So what role is going to play? Who is going to play against? So all these matchups are going to be key again because there are going to be a lot of changes because of the replacements that are going to come in. So now you don't know if Steve Smith will still play. Now, Shreyas Iyer is fit, so Bobby will come up the order at 3. So and all these replacements change small things, but they have a crucial impact of where a particular guy is going to come into the picture. Say, KKR is a nightmare team to predict because you are never sure who's going to bat well. They're probably the CPL team.
True.
They're probably the CPL team of
KKR is probably a nightmare team to support as well. So,
I mean, I've had so much, discussions with even Jared online in terms of what is KKR doing, how are they trying to function as a T20 side, and sometimes you think
they look lost.
And the game makes you look stupid if it works out. But we've seen the same with Oval Invincibles, how they played in the 100, in terms of how Morgan's leadership was. Yes, it's worked for England in the 50-over format, but just maybe it's not what the Kolkata Knight Riders want. I mean, do you have a guy, a lead Indian spinner, saying that I don't know how Morgan sees me?
Yeah.
Obviously, that quote could have a different meaning. It could have a lot more context to it. But just that coming out tells you that there is something wrong, and obviously there will be some holes that the team management will want to fill very early.
We also have another question on the IPL by one of our listeners at John Prabhukesha. Unlike CPL, choosing batsmen as captain or vice captain in the IPL, how effective would it be, or will that be a risk?
So as we say, every team is going to have a different kind of pattern in terms of who are likely to give most points from that team. If SRH is playing, probably someone like a Rashid Khan is probably likely to give you more points than any of their batsmen. So you have to go team-wise and pick out the key players for them who's going to do the key role for them. And then you, on that day, see what's the matchup. And if numbers suggest that, yes, this guy could do well, then you will probably just go with that. And it doesn't matter who the batsman or bowler or runner does. At the end, who's the guy who's likely to do the best on that particular surface against that particular team. And it can be anyone, and then you just back them.
Before we finish, keeping time in mind, quick top 4 prediction for the IPL. You know, you knew that question was coming.
First is easy. I don't think KKR will finish in top 4. Hopefully David Warner plays and it tells them why they should not have dropped him. So that's 2. Third, I don't think Mumbai or Chennai might win the IPL. And the last is hopefully a new winner in RCB so that people can stop asking Kohli to win a trophy. That agenda drops.
Yeah,
we could see
Absolutely.
a new champion this year.
And then,
could be the year.
And the key reason for RCB is because for the first time in a long time they've made very good purchases in terms of replacements.
Agreed.
So they've taken guys in form, and it's very rare for RCB to do that. So hopefully, I've not put the markers on them.
And those players can play a very important role as well. Yeah. So that's
actually
true.
Staying on the topic of RCB. There's a question which I've seen a lot on Twitter, and it's divided most of the fans. Hasaranga or Tim David? Which one do you go with? As let's say as a fantasy player, if you want to pick one of them.
Hasaranga always. Because to me, RCB's problem has never been batting. They've always had enough guys to bat around, and now, especially with the form of Maxwell, like after a fortune long time, he's finally found some form with the bat. The way now that team is structured, you see AB de Villiers not getting enough time to bat. Yeah. So if that is the batting order, and you have youngsters in Padikkal and guys coming off, you are not probably going to need Tim David. Yes, you can use him in particular matches on a very flat deck. Yes, you can use Tim David. Given that Hasaranga has not been giving runs with the bat. So that is particular a matchup that I think sure the team management will look into, that if the pitch is supporting spinners, you'll probably want to go with Hasaranga. That yes, he could give you that edge and also some runs with the bat. But if it's a flat deck and you think that no, you might want some extra runs to ensure Kohli and Padikkal and Maxwell just fire at the top, then you'll probably want to go with Tim David.
You would probably bank on a batting lineup like that. You would probably bank on the top 4 or 5 to do all the job.
Especially on a flat pitch. Yeah. Just one question before we finish. You touched on Kagiso Rabada earlier. Now, what would be your thought process going into the IPL? He hasn't taken a lot of wickets in recent series, but he was the top wicket taker last year in the UAE. So what's your thought process there in terms of, do you pick him in a team or not?
So as I said, it is always going to be about who is going to face against.
Yeah.
Last year we saw Mumbai take him apart at the death. Hardik Pandya and guys just blasted him and knock him. So those are the guys who love pace. So we have to be very sure in terms of who is going to bowl against and whether those guys enjoy pace. If they don't, just close your eyes and make him captain if he's bowling first. Because he's for sure going to bowl you 2 at the top or 1 at the top and then 3 at the back end.
Yeah.
So if the guys are not good, if the middle order is not good against pace, high-end bowling, hard-leg bowling, then you would probably want to back Rabada because he's likely to give you at least 2 wickets, which is far more safer than banking on a guy who could just get out on a duck and you could just
very true. Very true. Great insight. This was awesome. I had a lot of fun in this interview. Thanks, mate. Thank you for coming on.
I actually learned about fantasy sport more in these 30-35 minutes than I did since I started trying to learn about it.
Brilliant insights. Thank you so much, Nikhil. All the best with everything you do, and enjoy the IPL. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. Please continue doing this good work. I'd love to be back sometime.
Thank you.